Good morning. It's morning for me at the time of filming this. I've literally just woken up. So, I found another movie. It's another older one. Came out in 1955. So, if you can't tell from this and my previous pick, I will probably never review a movie after the 2000s. Slide that out there as a warning. I don't really know any movies after the 2000s. I'm gonna be real with you. I don't know any of the main ones. Like, I say I'm a fan of horror, old-timey horror though. You throw anything new at me, I've probably not seen it. Back to what we're watching today. It is a movie called The Day the World Ended. And the reason I wanted to share this was because it was way better than I was expecting. Like, I'm gonna be real, when I watch these older movies, I'm not really looking for like gems or anything, because some of them are. Usually the older movies that are gems are still like known to be good. So I don't really see any point in watching them. Occasionally I'll watch a good older one. Like, I really enjoy Young Frankenstein. I think that came out in 74. So that's nice. I'd recommend go watching that. Anywho, The Day the World Ended, 1955. That is not the day, because that's a year. All right, get it fucking together. Know your difference. So yeah, as I said before, I have seen this movie and I surprisingly enjoyed it. Like, all the characters, well, they do occasionally make some decisions I wouldn't agree with. At one point, it's like they heard me through the screen and did exactly what I asked. And that's all I want. That's all I want in a horror movie, is for one time, let them use their goddamn logic and survive. This movie came out 10 years after the war, but it takes place as if World War II had escalated to worldwide atomic bombing, which it very well could have. We had the Cold War afterwards, didn't we? When was that? Maybe this is more of the Cold War. 1947? It probably is about the Cold War and not World War II. So, as I was saying then, supposedly, like, everything's destroyed, society's ruined, everyone dies, and there's this, like, mist that covers the land. And I'm a little unsure about how the mist works. From what I know, infects them. It, like, turns them into sort of... So it's weird, as they sort of become zombies, but not really. They retain a lot of, like, a coherent mind. But before we really get to meet any of the characters, we meet a man who is infected. So he gets picked up by another guy and taken to this house. This is where I started to think, like, oh, I'm not gonna really agree with any decisions made in this movie. The dad, his first instinct when he sees the, like, first two people come over the hill, they're like this really well-dressed couple, and they come up and they're just like, they're looking for salvation in this house. Dad, he does not want to let them in whatsoever. He even tells his daughter, he's like, I only have food enough for me, you, and this guy named Tommy, who is, I guess, supposedly his daughter's boyfriend. But the daughter's just like, it would weigh on your conscience if you didn't. And I'd have to disagree with her. I don't think it would. You're telling me into the world, and I don't want to let some stranger into my home to eat my food that I rationed, and you're gonna be like, oh, you'll regret it. The only way I'd regret it is if they died on my porch, because now I just have dead bodies on my porch. I don't care if they didn't prepare. We just got out of World War II and we're in the Cold War. You're gonna look at me, you're gonna tell me you're not a little prepared for shit? You're just in your nicest suit and dress, walking in the middle of the fucking desert, and you're not prepared for anything? That's suspicious. And I completely agree with Jim. I wouldn't let them in whatsoever. But his daughter does. His daughter lets them in. And almost immediately, by the way, the dude in the suit has a gun. And he starts, like, threatening to shoot them. And I'm like, no. You don't come into my house at the end of the world, try and get my rations, and threaten me with a gun after you were just banging on my door because it was your last fucking hope. So we have the two well-dressed, the man and the woman, Tony, and then his girl's name is Ruby. I'm gonna give you all the names now so I can refer to them as their names. You have the infected man and the guy who picked him up. The infected man is Raddick. And then you have Rick. Jim, who is the dad who owns the house. And you have Louise, who is his daughter. But then the last guy we get is Pete, and he's an old gold miner, you know them. And he has a donkey named Diablo. So that is the rundown of characters. Remember them all. I'm not doing that list again. After the rich couple pull up and they threaten them with a gun and everything, Jim sort of calms them down. Tony's going off being like, you'll never see me without this gun. 10 minutes later, no gun. No gun, I'm gonna be real with you. You very quickly see him without a gun, and he very quickly spirals. When Rick and Radek show up, he just like walks into the home. He stands at the door for a second, like he's waiting for someone to come open the door for him, but then he just opens it up and walks in and carries this infected man into this random person's home, lays him down on this person's couch, and then just starts chatting with the dad. And I'm like, do you know each other? They don't. It's just, that's normal, I guess. That's a casual thing for them to do. That's how everyone's introduced into the home. Jim goes to tell everyone to, like, sort of clean up. Like, he's like, y'all look like shit. Go clean up, get that dust off of you. Everyone gets cleaned, everyone comes out, and Tony and Ruby all notice the new addition to the group, Radek, who is infected, laying on the couch. And he looks infected. But Tony brings up a good point. He's like, well, why worry about him? Let's just shoot him now. See, I thought I was going to be on Tony's side for this movie, because I was like, that's a good point. Like, I would do that. He's clearly infected. So Tony goes to shoot Radek. Jim says no. They both have their guns out now. And Jim's like, give me the gun. Give me the gun. And Tony looks like he may be going to give him the gun. And this is where he immediately lost me. He, like, snatches Louise and is, like, holding her at gunpoint because someone tried to take his gun. Dude, you clearly shouldn't fucking have it. That's when Rick comes out and he punches him and he gets the gun away from him. So we get the start of Tony sort of descending into psychosis as he no longer has his gun, but he was gonna get there anyway with it. He already wanted to kill Radek and he threatened Louise. We also get the start of Tony and Rick's rivalry, where it's all really one-sided and Tony is festering his hate. Jim gives us some lore. He tells them that this house is located in a valley and that the valley is what is protecting them from the fog and mist up above. It can't, like, get down into the valley because the mountains are full of lead, and that keeps away the radioactive gases. Nothing more to say on that. Now we get a little bit more lore on Radek and what exactly is happening inside his mind. And I love these bits because it really shows us the coherent state that they're in. So Radek says that he's gonna survive. And he's not posing it as a question anymore. It's not something where it's like, do you think I'll live? He's telling Rick, I'm going to be okay. Radek goes on to ask for some food because he's hungry. That's why usually you ask. But he specifies that he wants red meat as raw as he can get it. Which I'm pretty sure it doesn't take a genius to notice the signs of zombies right there. Like, people are red meat, aren't we? But Radek asks for bloody red meat, and Rick says, I'll see what I can get you. And goes out, and I think he gets him, like, some fucking turkey or some shit. Later that night, Radek wakes up. He is looking out of this window almost longingly, and Rick wakes up too, sensing that Radek is moving. He asks, he's like, hey, what's wrong? You doing okay? And Radek tells him, he's like, there's animals out there. There's animals in the wilderness right now. Rick's like, yeah, for sure. And just prior to this conversation with Radek, Rick was talking to Jim, and they both agreed that any animal, they call it game a lot, any animals out there would be infected. But Radek is now talking about how he can feel it in his body, in his bones, in that hive mind the infection caused. He can feel the game out there. And he'd rather the infected animals over the food that he was given prior in the day. Which I agree, it was nothing what he asked for. That looks fully cooked. But he's talking about how he wants to eat infected game. This is starting to show you the infection craves the infection. It wants to be around its own nastiness. Anything considered pure of its infection isn't really something they like to work with, you know? So while we don't really know now, we learn later on that the reason Radek isn't eating his food is because it is not infected food. It's rationed food that Jim had saved from before the bombs went off. And he's starving because he doesn't want to eat that non-infected shit. He wants good infected stuff to feed his infected body. But now we get to start Time jumping through a bit. Louise starts growing some plants. They never tell us what kind of plant, but I'm 90% sure that's a tomato plant. Talking about Radix still, because he's the only thing that's really throwing a wrench in logic at the moment, because he hasn't eaten. Rick's just like, it's odd that he's even survived this long. Like, outside of the food thing, the infection isn't progressing on him anymore. So they're all a little confused about it. Louise is like, he gives me the creeps. And I can't help but agree, because then he sort of like shuffles out of the room and the group goes silent. So he just lets him know that he's going to go for a little walk. And Jim's like, okay, well, don't go too far. You know, you're going to get infected. Oh, he tells him to stay inside the house. That's not a walk, by the way. I think we all clearly know a walk means outside, so Jim doesn't understand what walking is. It's also like, they've left the house multiple times. He did a Geiger counter reading outside by the pool. It was fine. It was perfectly fine. Not perfectly fine, but it was below 50, which is apparently safe. After he says don't leave the house, Radix just like, but I'm not afraid of the infection out there. I like it. I like the way it feels on my infected skin. We'll dip away from Radix for a bit, and we get to go over to Tony and Ruby, and we get to check in on how they're doing 3 weeks into staying with these absolute strangers, who all seem to be having an okay time. Tony is starting to make eyes towards Louise, you know, the girl he threatened with a gun twice. Ruby's doing some dancing to a record player. She seems to be doing more well than Tony. He's really letting all of his issues like fester inside of his head. While Tony's descending into madness and Ruby's starting to discover why she hates him so much, we get to see Rick and Louise, as Louise is starting to warm up to him in a friendly manner, I guess. They've been getting very close. They've been going on walks together and chatting, while Rick is starting to develop sort of a romantic relationship from his point of view, though I'm pretty sure she's still hung up on Tommy, because like he says he wants to live again, but we all know what that means. He mentions that to her and then leans in for a kiss, and she expertly dodges it. She hears this like noise off in the distance, and she's like, what is that noise? And he's like, I don't hear anything. And so she's like, I hear something. And he's like, all right, well, let's get inside. We find out after that Radix actually been sneaking out, or when he goes on his little walks at night and shit, he set up these traps to catch game and kill him and eat him up. Because he comes across a rabbit, he's gonna eat it, but then he gets spooked off by some bigger creature that has like 3 little claws, and it comes in and it grabs the little bunny when it's 3 little claws. And Rick and Jim go out on a walk later that day, and they find the bunny's full skeletal system on the ground, and they note that it's still moist. So they're like freshly eaten. So they test the bones, by the way. They test the bones and they find out it's 49 units of whatever you measure radiation in. They said it, I forgot it, I don't care. It's dangerous, obviously. And Jim's like, you think he could eat this? You think he could eat this poison meat? And this is where I start to kind of feel like Jim isn't the brightest bulb in the box, because when he came in, the Radix was at like 740. I don't think eating 49 more is really gonna do him any good or harm either way. I think he's just there. He's stuck at highly radiated, and we can just keep him highly radiated. Rick brings up his theory, and he is saying that he believes there are going to be more people like Radix out there that have lived through complete saturation of atomic energy, I guess, and have had so much like changes to their DNA. He believes there are more. And while he's talking about this theory, Jim brings up some sort of test. I'll call them the M test. Jim tries to keep it secret through a lot of the movie what they are, and it's actually really aggravating, because he will bring up the tests. He'll be like, oh, these M tests, and then Rick will be like, oh yeah, what happened? And he'll like give out the slightest amount of information. He'll be like, oh, we dropped some atomic bombs in testing. Okay. And then like 20 minutes later, he'll bring it up again, and it's like, oh, so what happened? And he's like, well, we dropped the bombs on animals. It takes up until like the last 20 minutes of the movie, I'm pretty sure, for him to finally fucking come out with it and be like, the animals were mutated. Not all of them died, some survived, and they were incredibly mutated. It took you so long to get this shit out. And it's like the tiniest bit of information. We knew shit was getting mutated. Look at Raddick, bro. So they go home then. And while at home, Rick is like, hey, Jim, you might want to tell them about the storm coming in. Jim does, and he goes, okay, so it's going to rain. Rain is radioactive. And then after warning them about that, he also mentions that they're running low on rations, so they're going to have to cut it. Because he went from having enough rations for 3 people to having to suddenly feed 7. So he should have been cutting rations from the beginning, homie. While telling them about the rain that's coming in, though, Jim does let them know that he found a lake that doesn't seem to be contaminated. Which this is what confuses me a little bit, though, because if the rain's contaminated but the lake isn't contaminated, then when it rains, won't the rain contaminate the lake? Later you learn the rain isn't even contaminated, but like the lady's gotta have a little bathe in it. They take a little swimmy swim, and Louise starts to hear that noise that she heard with Rick earlier, and said that she got the feeling of someone watching her. So her and Ruby hightail it out of there. The girls go home, and we get a scene of Rick and Jim finding large footprints. So they're now aware of like the beast that Raddick was dealing with earlier. That creature is whatever is like making the noise at Louise. Louise comes out looking for Rick, and when Jim tells her that Rick's out for a little walk, she's like, oh, well, I'll go wait outside until he gets back. So after Tony gets up and follows her out, alarm bells in my head immediately. But Ruby, she goes out too, and I thought she was going to do a little bit fucking more than she did, to be real with you, but at least she could sense that, like, Tony was kind of going to do some crazy shit. He starts to, like, grab at Louise and basically forces her to kiss him. And she's able to, like, push her way out of it and run off. And she's saying the whole time, she's like, no, no, no. Louise escapes, and Ruby comes up and is kind of just like, wants Tony to just give up on Louise. Rick takes the time, while he's out and all this is happening, he's actually following Raddick, who is, like, going up out of the valley and onto the mountains atop. And at this point, Rick's pretty certain. He's like, okay, Raddick is like, biologically probably no longer a person. This is when we finally get Jim sharing with us, and I told you all this shit before, so they're pretty much explaining that to him. And then he pulls out he's like, well, we couldn't take photos because it was all like experimental and very highly secretive, but I sketched some shit. And I don't know why, but when he said that, I was immediately like, oh, these are gonna be some like high quality sketches. No one just decides to draw something instead of a photo unless they're good at it. No, they're pretty cut and dry. Rick and Jim are halfway up the mountain that Rick saw Raddick go up. While they're looking at the mountain and everything, and they're like reading the mist for any radiation, a new man comes down the mountain, and he is severely more mutated than Raddick is. And they ask the kid, they're like, hey, what's up there, and he's like, more of us. And they're like, a lot more? And he's like, no, but they're fucking strong. Oh, this is where Rick brings up the stages, and he goes, Raddick is obviously stage 1. This man that they have come across is stage 2. And then Rick poses the stage 3, and that is what the sketch of the monkey showed us. Now we go back to some of the the plot development among some of the people, you know. So we get to see more of Ruby basically trying to get Tony to notice her, Tony being a dick. We get to see this conversation with Rick and Louise, where Louise is telling him about the weird like tingling and sensation she gets, and the like feeling of being watched and the vibrations and all that. And basically saying that, like, it's getting stronger. And she thinks whatever it is that's giving her this, like, sensation is getting closer. Now we get to have a little conversation with Raddick, saying he's like, I saw you follow me the other night. And Rick's just like, the things you do interest me. Raddick's just like, I get that. All right. Rick's just like, what's up there? What's up at the top? And Raddick is like, heaven, dude. He loves staying up there and spending all his time up there. And Rick's like, well, why do you come back here then? And Raddick's just like, well, I got an enemy. That sort of sets like alarm bells off in Rick's head. He's like, there's something bigger out there. And they're just like, we need to post up a night guard. Jim's just like, I'll do it. And Rick's like, I'll do it. And Jim's like, I don't trust Tony with a gun, which is valid. Like, we get to go into the next scene, which is everyone in the living room, minus Jim. So I guess he's out on night guard at the moment. Ruby's dancing to the music. She's trying to like liven up the mood a bit, I think. I think she's starting to go a little crazy here too, especially with the way like Tony's treating her. But we go from there and we get to see Jim snoozing outside on his night guard post. Rick comes out and gives him a quick thwack. Originally, I thought it was to the side of the head. They switch off, and now Rick takes over night guard, and the first thing he does is to do like a perimeter of the house, and he notices that Diablo's gone. And they realize that Radek has taken Diablo. Jim and Rick decide to go after him. They're going through. They find the bones of the man they saw come down from the mountains. Pete wakes up and he notices that Diablo is missing. And Tony actually decides to be a decent guy for once. And it's just like, I'll help you go look for your donkey home slice. The thing that's been like sending messages to Louise is it comes up and it strangles Radek. That's when everyone, including Jim and Rick, stumble upon it. Tensions are high in the household. Louise is starting to get more paranoid about the thing that's like speaking to her. It's now speaking to her and like calling her name in her mind. Pete is just distraught at losing Diablo. So he tries to just walk into the mist. And he goes up into the mountains into the mist. And Jim tries to follow him and get him to come back down. But Pete's able to like whack him once on the head and knock him out. And that just works. He then goes up, gets a few good mining thwacks in, and dies. And this is where I start to get a little confused on the mist, the fog here. Pete just dies. He didn't get infected whatsoever. He doesn't start any stages. He doesn't go through any process. It's not like a rapid infection where it just takes over and then kills him so quick. The mist just genuinely doesn't affect Pete. What did the people who were infected, were they only infected at the initial detonation of the bombs? No more people can be infected, but people can still die from the mist. It's like, I don't think they ever explain this, and it's one of my biggest questions about the whole movie, because now we have the thing where Jim had run up there to save Pete, but he had gotten knocked out, and the mist had shifted wind, and he's laying in the mist now, but he gets up and he walks his happy home, and it's supposed to be assumed that he's now going to undergo infection, or he is also sick. The only thing that makes him look ill is the fact that he refuses to get out of bed. What are the parameters for infecting people? We get everyone in the house, minus Radek and Pete, now that they are no longer with us. Ruby tells Tony that she's noticed a knife is missing from the kitchen. So now it's kind of like, oh, who has the knife? Tony. We all kind of know Tony has the knife. Louise goes to look for Rick. Tony follows. And he goes up to Louise and threatens her with a knife and says, move away from the house. We're going to go somewhere private. They end up moving up to this like little cliffed area, and Louise trying to basically bargain her way out of it. Neither of them know that Ruby has actually followed them, similar to the prior scene. And when they get up to this like cliffed area, Tony sets the knife down. Ruby's able to kind of come up and grab that knife from behind Tony. And now she has a knife and she's like, let go of her. Tony is now like attention diverted. So Louise scrams, like, what more of an invitation do you need to get out of there? And now we have Ruby and Tony alone on this cliff, and they're talking, and Ruby is kind of like sticking it to him a little bit, but you can see she still cares for him. She quickly snaps back into it, and she's like, okay, well, then I'm not doing this. And she goes to stab him, but he stops her because she goes for one of the like upper stabs when she could have just like gone for a gut stab real quick, which is sadly how she is hit. Carries her to the edge of the cliff where he just sort of like tosses her body over it. Tony comes home and basically makes up a lie that all serial killers make up, being like, she ran away. We flash sideways and we see Rick and Louise leaving the lake because Louise is like, something's watching me. I know something's watching me. That night, they all go to bed, and Louise wakes up because something's like calling to her in her head, and she goes out of the room and she grabs a photo of her and Tommy. You remember Tommy? She looks at it and then sets it down and goes to bed, and we get this shadow that kind of comes across her wall, and it's that stage 3 infected person that we've been seeing everywhere. We get to see the shadow and we see the horns, and for some reason the thing is in their house, and it like walks down the hallway and it wakes Louise up, but like not physically, just like telepathically wakes her up, and she walks from the home out into the woods where she where she comes across this thing and just immediately faints into its arms. And now we get to see a bit where Rick finds out that she's missing. Right before he leaves, Jim is like, here, take this big boy gun, the pistol that I gave you, under my bed since you have that bigger gun now. So Jim's starting to get the heebie-jeebies from Tony, and Louise is being carried by that monster to the lake. And the stage 3 guy, he just kind of like puts her in the water. The creature doesn't ever go into the water, and she's taken note of this. She's like, it talks to me at the lake, but it never gets in the water. It can't. It's scared of it. Tony was able to get a hold of Jim's gun and is now like threatening him. Anywho, Rick hunts down the creature and Louise, and she's just like, yo, get in the water. It can't get you in the water. And so they get in the water, and then it starts to rain, and they notice that when it starts raining, the monster, he runs off. So they get out of the water. And back at the house, we have Tony and Jim, and Tony is like, it's raining. The rain will kill him. It'll infect him, won't they? Because he's still worried about Louise. So he's like, I want Louise to come back, but this rain's going to kill her. So, like, I will just be alone here, won't I? Jim's like, fuck, man, I don't know. Let me test the rain. Let me test it with my Geiger counter. Tony's like, okay. So he goes and he gets a little cup of water, and Jim tests it, and this is when they find out that the water is clean. Rick's out there hunting the creature. The rain, like, starts to melt it and burn it like the Wicked Witch. Rick fires off 3 shots, being like, yo, we survived. We're coming back. And Tony is like, okay, cool. They're on their way back. I can see him coming over the hill. I'm going to shoot Rick as he walks up. Finally, as Tony's taking aim at Rick, you hear a gunshot, and he just sort of, like, crumples in on himself. Seeing Tony go down was so satisfying. I was like, finally, oh my god, he dies in the last like 4 minutes of the movie. Rick and Louise go in there and they visit Jim, and he dies, but before he does so, he tells them, he's like, there are other survivors out there. They pack up and everything and they set out. That is the end of the movie. One thing real quick I do want to point out, they're not going to survive long. They're wearing shorts and goddamn t-shirts. What is keeping the mist away from them? Was that not an issue, the mist? But the other big thing I just want to kind of chat about at this moment, because I've said most of my pieces we've gone through the movie. The, like, unspoken thing, the stage 3 creature that's sort of following them, and, like, that's Tommy. I love that. I love that they never once say it in the movie, but it very clearly is, you know? Like, from what they've shown us at the beginning of the movie, when we first meet Jim and Louise, they mention that he probably isn't coming back, and they can't be waiting forever. And they mention Tommy by name during this scene, and they talk about how Louise is basically just like waiting and longing for him to come back. She loves this man and she wants him to return. When they start having Louise get messages and like have this feeling of being watched, we're pretty easily able to assume that those messages that Louise is getting in her mind and the feeling of being watched is Tommy fully infected as a stage 3, trying to communicate with her in some fashion, because you no longer have the ability to really verbalize anything anymore. It lets her know that it's there in other ways, but it's never aggressive towards her. Even when she followed it out into the woods, it didn't attack her, it startled her and she fainted. Almost very clear that this thing, it knows her name. She says it calls her out by name. It must be something that had known her as a human, something nearby, something that keeps going to the house. It knows the surrounding area, it knows her, and it didn't want to hurt her. It didn't want to do anything to her at all. It just wanted to watch over her. It's pretty clearly fucking Tommy. It's just so beautifully never outwardly told to you that it is Tommy. And I love that. I wish more movies did that shit. But yeah, Jesus Christ, I've been talking about this movie for so long. I'll see you guys later.